I got to start video here.
Come on, you're the filmmaker. There you are.
Here I am.
Hi, David. How was the party last night?
It was good. It was good cheer, fun.
Were there a lot of Hollywood execs and starlets?
Actually, it wasn't so much. This was more people from Chapman, where I teach, Chapman Film
Oh,
School.
what are you teaching now? Like, give me an idea of what your last lecture was about.
I don't lecture so much. I do more mentoring. People bring in stuff for me to read, scripts for me to read, and I critique them and give them notes, and then help give them ideas on what they might do better, how they might change it for the better.
I went out and visited Ron Shelton a few years ago, and it's his contention that the Hollywood is I may have grown up with thinking it was isn't there anymore. Like it's more disparate kind of areas that produce films. Is that an accurate assessment? The
I
Hollywood.
think so. I mean, you have feature films which have pretty much become just big studio movies, tentpole movies, and the independent film has sort of been absorbed by streaming services like Netflix and Amazon, Hulu, Apple Plus. So the business is, the business of making movies has become more diffused in a way,
Right.
and you have different levels of control that those different entities exercise in the making of films. So there's not as much autonomy always. There's kind of a fine line between television series now and movies, because some of the best writing and some of the best storytelling is being done on streaming services and cable television shows. So
If you were to ask me right now what my favorite production, let's just say production, as much as I like certain films, I'd say Better Call Saul was for me the pinnacle of storytelling because they had 6 years to tell a story. And
yeah, it was great. I mean, it was a great character. First of all, you have to start with characters that are compelling, characters that people uh, just want to see what happens next with.
right.
They don't necessarily always have to be, they don't always necessarily have to be likable from the get-go. They don't have to be, it used to be in storytelling that you wanted to get people on the side of your characters to begin.
Dorn was a character that you didn't like right away, right? In Major
Yeah.
League, and you wanted to do that, right? And
Mhm.
and talk to me. Was that a conscious effort with him? And kind of segue into Major League and how is it found such a when I talk to people, there's Bull Durham, there's Major League, but Major League seems to edge out Bull Durham. And I'm a little surprised in some ways because I don't see them as the same animal, if that makes sense. Do you know what I'm saying? And I see them as
Yeah, no, I've always felt that it was strange that to compare those two movies. I happen to love Bull Durham,
yeah,
but Bull Durham is it's a much different tone than Major League is a comedy.
yeah.
And Bull Durham is kind of a romantic dramedy.
Mhm.
And I think they're very different kinds of movies, and they're kind of trying to do different things.
Right.
And so when people compare them one to one, I just feel like it's apples to oranges. I'm not quite sure why they do that. People tend to compare their favorite things in a certain area to other things in that same area, but I've never felt that the comparison of Major League and Bull Durham was one that really made a lot of sense to me.
I read recently where there was an interview where Gene Hackman didn't think Hoosiers was going to work, and he actually told Dennis Hopper, "I hope you saved your money because we're never working again." But in the midst,
Well,
but in the midst of Major League, I mean, you know how I love the Sting. I think I mentioned
mhm.
to you once that it's in my top five or whatever. But when you're making Major League, what did you feel in the midst of shooting? All the headaches aside, did you feel you had something?
Well, I felt like I felt very happy with the way that people were approaching their characters, and how how well they were inhabiting them and staying within them in every situation. You never know how an audience is going to react to a film when it's all put together. Because when you make a film, you're making it in segments. You're not even making it in chronological order. So you're doing, you're doing one thing here, another part here, another part here, and you never know how it's all going to work together. You may be happy with it day to day, but you have no real idea of how it's going to work all together. You do the best you can on every film, and some of them people respond to, and some they don't. And maybe they would have responded better 2 years later or 2 years before. You don't know. You never know. It's popular culture. It changes very quickly, and all you can do is do the very best you can and hope that it strikes a chord.
I actually thought of doing a book on talking to directors, how much was shot in chronological, and there's some actors better at dealing with that non-linear approach to a film.
There are some actors who are better at that. I think the more experienced actors tend to who have done it more, have learned how to navigate that and are able to keep their performances consistent. Sometimes younger actors have a problem with not being able to shoot in continuity.
Well, like Sheen was a kid when he came on. He didn't have that much experience, right?
Yeah, but the thing about Sheen was we had him on a 5-week deal, and we had to shoot him out in the first 5 weeks. So he got to shoot a lot of his stuff in continuity, just because we needed to get him out because he had another movie to go on to.
Did Platoon come first or yours? I sent you an email a couple weeks ago asking you if you cast. I think Platoon came first, correct?
Platoon came first, yes.
Now, did you see the chemistry between Sheen and Berenger, or was it just happenstance?
It was actually Joe Roth, who was at Morgan Creek at the time, who brought Charlie and Tom back together. It was not necessarily my idea to do that. I was happy to hear that he
it worked, man. It worked.
Oh, it worked great. It really worked great. But you have to remember that Platoon was hardly a comedy. And, so when you're starting to think about casting actors who are not only going to be credible as baseball players and bring the dramatic elements that the movie has to the fore, but also have comic ability, you would probably not think of Berenger and Sheen at that point in their careers as being guys that you're going to find humorous. And
it's one of those a golden connection, David. I mean, one of those you look back and go, damn, that was lucky, it worked, all those kind of things.
Yeah. It was.
And I'm not blowing smoke, but it really worked. And I'm a pretty hard. So what would you say to Sheen or Berenger or anybody if they're coming into a scene where you shot where Berenger meets Rene Russo's boyfriend and her family, but let's say that scene comes, what do you say to the actor to say, okay, I know, I mean, to get them into a scene that's non-linear? Do you just kind of talk to them a little bit and say, okay, here's where we're at. We haven't gotten here yet. Can you walk me through just a quick scene and maybe an example in Major League?
If we're shooting it out of order?
Yeah, I mean,
I'll first remind them of what comes before and what comes after, so that that they're they're mindful of the context, and then I'll just talk to them about playing the beats of that scene, what is happening in that scene, regardless of what you may remember comes before or after. In the end, and for Tom in that scene, it's very much about him going to try to win her back and him finding himself in a position where he is kind of condescended to and put down and looked at as kind of not, especially by the boyfriend, as not in his league, because he's a veteran kind of journeyman baseball player. Mm-hmm. And it's about Berenger's character. It's about Jake Taylor reacting to that from the kind of dignity that he has and the sense that he has about himself, despite what others in the room may think.
I think Renee Russo used to be a model, I believe, and then she kind of came into the game. But
She was a supermodel. She was
she
not
pulled
just
it
a
off.
model, she was a huge model.
What had she done prior to Major League, and what made you think, yeah, she can do this?
She had not done anything prior to Major League. What made me think she could do this was I auditioned her for a role in Cannery Row, the film I directed several years before Major League, and
With
I thought she had a
Nick Nolte, and my super crush from Urban
Nick Nolte and Deborah Winger.
Yeah.
And she had a great quality. I mean, I really thought there was something really lovely and warm and charming about her, but she was very raw as an actress. She hadn't done much. So I kept her in mind, and I brought her back in to read for Major League. And again, I found all of those qualities in her, but I found a little more control of her instrument, as we like to call it then. And so I felt she was ready to take this on, and she really was.
I thought she played a similar character in Shelton's Tin Cup, but then again, you go to In Line of Fire, and she played, she had that real, not Garbo-esque, but a real something about her face that was really warm to a viewer. And I think that,
well, it's just her personality. I mean, it's hard not to like Renee. It really is. Both in person and on film.
She did a nice job in Get Shorty too.
Yeah, she did. She's done some great stuff in her career.
Well, I'll get lynched if I don't ask you about this. Bob Uecker, what was it like working with Bob, and how did you know he could pull it off?
Well, I'd seen Bob in the television show that he did, and I'd seen him in the commercials, the Bud Light commercials, and or were they Miller Lite? I can't remember.
It was Miller Lite, yeah.
Miller Lite. And he was hysterical, and I just thought, this guy's perfect. I can't think of a better Harry Doyle.
You couldn't have cast it with anybody better.
No. And working with him was great. I mean, we only had him like usually 2 or 3 days. We had him 2 or 3 days because he's still, a working announcer for the Brewers.
Isn't that amazing in his 80s?
It is amazing. It is amazing. He's, and he's not at all like Harry Doyle, obviously, as an announcer for the Brewers. He plays it straight. He doesn't, he's not drinking. He's not doing anything like that.
Right.
And I think that it's, when I met him and talked to him, I just thought, I can't do any better than this. And of course, there are times when he would come up with ad libs, and he said, "Do you mind if I say this?" And I said, "Do I mind? Do I mind? Please say that."
I'm hoping you'll do that. And do you have any idea what a guy like that, the movie and a guy like that means to a town like Milwaukee? I mean, is it even easy to understand how much he's woven into the fabric of this place?
Yeah, no, I knew that, and obviously he is, in many ways, he's like the Vin Scully of Milwaukee.
Yes, he is.
Vin Scully is associated with the Dodgers. Obviously, Bob is associated with both Milwaukee and the Brewers, and I mean, you can't separate him from the culture of that town and from that team. He is the voice of that culture, that team.
You're exactly right. And there's really, you can't dissect it. It just is. Before I let you go, I want to touch base on the challenges of shooting in County Stadium and maybe a quick reasoning. I know the scheduling conflict with Cleveland was a problem, but just talk to me about, I know crowds were always a problem getting them evened out and picking. Talk to me about the physicality of shooting in a major league ballpark, especially one as Spartan as County Stadium, and just maybe a couple.
Well, actually, the move to Milwaukee worked out really well for us because we had getting extras to fill out a shot to make it look like they're actually people watching these ball games. In the first part of the film, it wasn't such a problem because we were playing the Indians as a team that were terrible, and the attendance was terrible. Mm-hmm. But once they started to get good, we needed to attract some extras to fill up the shots and make it look like There were actual people there, and we were very lucky. We had a cadre of about 400 extras who became friends of the movie. They showed up every day. I've never seen that happen. We had a night where we promoted, the big night where where they sing Wild Thing and the whole thing. That night we promoted, we had 27,000 people there. Now, again, that's unheard of. Most towns, you promote, hopefully you get 10,000.
Right.
Milwaukee, they were fabulous. They came through for 27,000 people, and we were just all stunned. And the players, everybody, Berenger, Sheen, Wes Snipes, they said, this is so exciting to us. We've never acted in front of this many people.
Right.
It's like being real ball players.
You think they have fond memories
Dennis
of that?
Haysbert felt the same way, all of them. It was and obviously for Corbin, who plays Roger Dorn, they've been on big TV shows and they've done other things, but they never were in a position where they were acting in front of 27,000 people. And then these people started singing.
Yeah.
They were pumped. And when when Serrano runs around the bases with the bat in his hand, which is of course illegal, but my feeling about that was, well, sue me, so what? He was totally pumped because the people in the stadium were going crazy. They were really, really, they were all actors that night, and they did a fabulous job for us. And I'm eternally grateful for that. That's one of the things I think that took the movie to another level of authenticity.
Are you saying that wasn't before or after a game? They showed up just for the shoot? After
that night that we promoted, where we gave away a car and some televisions and a trip to Europe and so forth, like I said, about 400 people showed up every night, and they were pretty much the same people. And they got to know the actors. They brought cookies. And what we would do is when we had a shot, we'd move them from one place to another. Right. But we tried to keep, once we were shooting in one direction, we tried to stay in that direction because we didn't want to move them too much, because it really gets to be a hassle after a while. The other thing was, for the final games, most of the people are standing. And when you have crowd that's standing, you can put people every other row. You don't have to fill up every row. You can go every other row because you can't see the row behind them when they're standing.
Right.
So, that 400 became 800. And that was something I could work with. I could make the shot, because literally 1 inch outside of every shot you see, there's nobody. One person.
You pulled off a magic trick then.
That's what you do. That's what you do as a filmmaker. That's what you have to do to make it look real and make it look like there are real people in the stands. I didn't want to use cutouts and stuff like that.
Well, those are things you had to learn on the fly, though, because how could you ever have imagined you bought that row in between without having been on the spot?
Right. Those are things you learn. Those are things you learn when you're doing it. You wouldn't think of it beforehand, but when you're there and you're looking at it, you say, everybody move from one row back. And I looked at it and I said, it doesn't look any different. Especially if you're on a longer lens that tends to foreshorten everything. It doesn't look. It looks like doesn't look like there's an empty row there.
And do you remember Pete Vukovich, working with him?
Oh my God, yes.
He's a character.
Great. He's a real character, and but he brought that character to the movie, and he fit right in with the others, and the line, how's your wife and my kids? That's his line.
He came up with that?
Yeah. I said, Vuk, what would you say? I said, you're in the batter's box. What would you say to a catcher that you know, you've played against him before, and you just what is some remark you might casually throw out to a catcher? Because sometimes you'll see a hitter look back and say something to the catcher, and the catcher not or whatever. So I said, "What would you say?" And that's what he came up with.
That's pretty good.
Great.
That's pretty good.
Yeah.
You look at the movie Airplane, and the Zuckers are from here, and I kind of keep in touch with them. But how many lines in your film are quoted on a daily basis? I mean, that's a bit outside, just a bit outside.
Yeah, well, that became a big line.
And Behringer's, I don't think
Center.
this one's got the distance when the pop up.
Right. Too high.
Oh, and then Euchre said Cleveland, or he hit the ball. I forget some of these, but some of them. Does that feel good to know
No,
that?
it feels great when a movie becomes part of the bigger culture, that people say lines from the movie in other situations than baseball.
Well,
so
it must feel great. Know you're loved.
No, it does. It's
seriously
fun.
know how much your product is loved in this city, and it means a lot to Milwaukee to have that kind of. I worked at the bar you shot in. I know the house you shot in on Lake Drive. I knew Grits' Pizzazz, where you shot that scene where the restaurant scene was Grits' Pizzazz, and we don't get anything else shot here, so you can understand why it was so.
Yeah, no, well, I have to say that Milwaukee has I have a warm spot in my heart for Milwaukee. They were a real godsend to making this movie.
Seriously, come back sometime. It's changed night and day since you've been here. Milwaukee is really a different town, David. It's got more restaurants and more things to do now than you'd imagine. I've lived here.
I have no doubt. It's a great place.
Not just Laverne and Shirley anymore.
Yeah. Well, I'm glad to hear that.
I appreciate it.
All right, thank you. It was fun talking.